Hello, listeners, and welcome to Between the Pixels. It is a podcast that I started where I can have roundtable discussions with some of my friends about video games, specifically about hidden stories and messages within games, some subtext read between the lines kind of stuff, as well as the cultural impact that some games have on our society. With me today, I have my best friend, Will Flair.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How's it going?
Real quick, Will, just letting everyone know where you're from, or I mean, like, what on the internet you're from.
Oh, okay. So I'm one of I'm the primary host for Plus U Productions. I'm assisted by our friends JT Wolf and Vera Words. We help to create content that you, the viewer, gets to light the fuse on. So that's our main slogan. Basically, your comments and feedback actually help to shape some of the segments that we do in the future. Mm-hmm. So as you check us out and you give us a little bit of feedback, you never know, that might help shape one of the next things that you see.
All right, sweetness. All right, so to get into it, like I said, we're here to discuss subtextual things within games. And a game that I want to talk about today for our first episode, one that we both play and one that you introduced me to, Warframe.
Oh, okay. All right. We going good and we're going strong.
Yeah, as you know, I've been playing today in order to do a little more research as well as to grind because I need some resources. But for those of you who don't know, Warframe is a free-to-play game across all platforms, I believe. It's on Xbox One now, right?
Yep, it's on Xbox One and PS4 and PC and yeah.
Yep, so if you have any of these things and you want to try it out, it is free. There's some things that, down the line might have to pay for, like extra space in your inventory, but if you are smart about it, you might not have to spend a dime. So definitely check it out. It's a very fun game. And what I want to talk about today, Will, is when you first introduced me to the game a year ago, you described the main characters, the Tenno, which is the faction that the player belongs to, as space ninjas, and that was very accurate. I realized there wasn't anything about that was inaccurate because legitimately they're very agile, they're very stealthy, and they use that to their advantage in order to accomplish a lot of ninja-esque missions, including assassinations, spy missions, defensive missions, stuff like that. Now, another thing that you mentioned when I first started playing it was that the Grineer, who are one of the enemy factions of the game, you compared them to space Nazis. You called them space Nazis. Now it's accurate. It's accurate too, to a degree.
Yeah.
Now,
only to a degree.
And I very much believed it, and I took that as truth. And it's very easy to see why, because in a lot of ways, the Grineer as a faction do come off as very much like a fascist Nazi party. Now, for those of you, again, who don't know, and I should have mentioned spoiler alert for anyone, but it's not really much of a spoiler because it's...
Come on, y'all. Y'all know that you're about to get spoilers up in here. It's my podcast about gaming secrets, and if you don't expect spoilers in this, you're a little slow. I think you don't understand what this is.
Well, for this episode, for future episodes, spoiler alert for every game ever. So, okay, but for those of you who don't know about the Grineer faction are this race of beings that are very militaristic. Their goal is to go across the galaxy and take over and conquer everything in their path, because they believe themselves to be the Aryan race, or the the elite race. I'm sorry, I misspoke. They believe themselves to be the elite race in the galaxy, and thus they wish to wipe out all the other races in order to become the only surviving race in the galaxy, for they see themselves as the prime specimen.
Yeah, you see why I got space Nazis, right?
Yeah, it's very easy to come to that conclusion. Now, see, here's the thing, though. A few weeks ago, I started thinking, which is why I came up with this podcast, I started thinking about them being space Nazis, and I started to wonder, DE, the developers of the game, if they had gone so far as to suggest that the Grineer are space Nazis, and they portray it that way, if that was their intention, and we're going under the assumption that all of this is intentional, because they seem to know what they're doing. It's not random.
Yeah, they seem to be world building enough to just... universe building enough.
So if they had done this intentionally and they were space Nazis, my question then is, what would the other factions of the universe be?
Oh.
Now, see, along with the Grineer, who, again, space Nazis, there's another faction known as the Corpus. The Corpus, the other major enemy faction, are these technologically enhanced beings who very much focus on acquiring financial gain, and their society, I notice, is one of which where the more money you have, the more powerful you are. Now, given that their whole philosophy is based on acquiring currency by any means necessary, with Grineer being space Nazis, and this is going to sound a little racist, but it almost makes it sound like the Corpus are Jewish people.
Yeah.
And I'm not going off of any personal belief, of course. I'm going off of the very popular stereotype.
Yeah, just general stereotype. Like, you don't necessarily believe in it, but it would be the thing that pop culture would understand.
Exactly. So, but see, with that in mind, I have to question then why DE would do something like that, because they seem to be, I don't know, good people. It's hard to believe that they would be anti-Semitical. Only because the Corpus are an enemy faction, remember. It's not like you're alongside them. It's not like you have this weird balance. They are actual enemies, and you do have to kill them because their goal is to wipe everything out so that they can gain profit. Now, because of that thought, I started questioning that, and I started thinking, well, maybe then that they're not supposed to represent that group, and maybe then the Grineer are not supposed to be space Nazis.
Yeah.
And that's where I had a train of thought that led me, and I want you to swallow this for a second.
Okay.
Consider the fact that instead of space Nazis, the Grineer are communists. That they're representative of the Communist Party. Now, here's my logic with it. The Grineer, because they believe so much that they are the perfect race, they have gone so far as to clone themselves. So their entire army is just a one massive clone army, except for like the women, who I think are still clones, just with the gender swap thing. Because there are some women in that army. But other than that, they're all just clones. And I can see why people, of course, would go to that Nazi fascist idealism. But when you think about the fact that they're all exactly the same, they're all treated the same, and they all act as a community, it's not hard to see that they could be based off of the Communist Party. Especially because when you look at the aesthetics of the Grineer as well, that they're very crude, and they're not technologically advanced in a lot of ways, but they still stick together, and they have that society that is very much like the idea, the stereotype of, for example, Russia, where people think of it as almost like a third world country where, it's just sad and depressing all the time and everything is just rough over there. That kind of idea. So what do you think about that? The possibility that they might actually be representative of the Communist Party.
I could definitely see it. To clarify, when I first started playing the game, it was also explained to me it's space ninjas versus space Nazis, and you get to shoot them up, and that was literally how it was straight up told to me. I was like, sold, great. As I was playing it, I think what really got me was the character Alad V, and how he really stood out against like this mass populace that he seemed to have, that he was leading as a general in the Grineer. And so that was really...
Alad V?
I'm sorry. Who was... Tor, whoever the first person...
Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about. His name is, like, Vaktur or something like that.
Yeah, that dude.
The first boss.
Yes, the first boss. Like, honestly, after I beat the fuck out of this dude, I completely forgot about him.
Yeah, no.
But, he reminded me a lot of, like, what I would imagine most people... not in Germany to imagine what Hitler was like.
Right.
Because of how well he organized this well-oiled killing machine of people, and at the same time, he was the one that stood out about them. Then he basically tries to convert you into his slave in like the first one, making you, like, trying to force you to see his way of life, blah, blah, blah. And pretty much telling everyone else, well, you're not worth it, so you die. Right. Blah, blah, blah. Those type of things, it gave me that, I got a little bit Nazi feel, but I can also see a communist feel of it too. And I don't necessarily think they're one way or the other, but they definitely take from adaptations of like the Communist Party, the Nazi Party, those elements are in there because
Right.
they're pretty big. And on top of being bad guys, they're kind of dicks. Like both
Yeah.
sides,
They are.
the Corvus and the Grineer are just all dicks. They're kind of the worst things that you would ever imagine in humanity, personified in these big ass armies. Like, so I associate them with the dick of humanity.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. That, and I can understand that. Now, but see, going off of the assumption that they might be communists.
Yes.
And again, going off the assumption that DE did this intentionally, that could mean then that the corpus could represent the capitalist party. Given that they live in a society where profit is everything and the person with the most money is the person in charge. Plus, if you look at their society, if you look at their missions, a lot of the time, if you pay close attention to them, the actual corpus soldiers wandering around, as well as if you go in and you observe their weaponry in the labs, you get a feel that they're not actually soldiers. A lot of these guys are miners, they're construction workers, they're laborers. If they're not that, then they're just security guards, just trying to protect their own.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the weaponry was, if you read it, will say this was once a mining tool, this was once a tool to break apart rocks, this was once a tool to help with construction, but has been remodified to become a weapon if need be.
Yeah.
But so it's under the impression, though, that these could still be used as mining tools, and they still use them as mining tools. And other than the actual people, they have just a bunch of robots.
Yeah.
Which fits the idea that where our society is going, where a lot of people are afraid that robots are going to take over our jobs and remove us from the workplace because, let's realize, it's cheaper for the people up top
Yeah.
than to actually keep us hired. With that in mind, also, I noticed another difference between the Corpus and the Grineer. The Corpus don't give a crap about their soldiers. If you ever talk to one of the very few actual organic bosses, like Alad V and
that dude.
I can't think of really whom else, but they
I
don't.
was about to say, do they really have it?
Most of them are robots, but these people don't care about their fellow Corpus. In fact, it's almost like they don't exist in their eyes. They're like lesser beings. If you look at the Grineer, they actually care very much when you do harm to their soldiers. If you look at people like Tel Regor or even Kayla Dethane, even though she's got the tough love going on, she really does.
Sure.
She still does show anger for the fact that you are killing Grineer soldiers. And Tal Regor specifically states that he wants to kill you because of what you did to his tube men. So you can see that they very much care about their community, such as it is, in the Grineer faction, whereas the Corpus, they don't care because they're lesser to them. So that's why I started comparing the Corpus to a more capitalist society. Plus, it would fit well of a capitalist versus communist conflict going on, much like that of our Cold War. Now, how do you feel about that? Would you say that makes...
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I can see that. And it makes the background of the game a little bit more fun.
It does, actually, yeah, because now that they both have something of a definition to them, it does add a little more of a dynamic when you're playing through it. Now, if we do define them as such, though, it does raise a few more questions. Specifically, and I think this question actually, if we answer it, would answer most of the other questions. If the Grineer are communists, and if the Corpus are capitalists, what then are the Tenno?
Yeah, I was thinking that was the question that you were going to ask.
Because you've got communists versus capitalists, and then you have the Tenno, which pretty much just act as mercenaries most of the time.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a type of mission in the game where you can go in and side with a single faction against the other one, and they'll pay you at the end of that conflict, much like a mercenary. So this is where I'm very curious as to what you have to say, because I have no real actual conclusion as to what the Tenno could be.
So, okay. Warframe is actually based off of another game that existed for like the PS3 and Xbox 360 ? I would say. Whatever that
Right.
I cannot remember the name of it.
It was Dark Sector, wasn't it?
Dark Sector.
Yeah, there
yes. Yay. Okay. Good. It's based off of Dark Sector. Apparently, it's supposed to be the future of what happened in Dark Sector.
Okay.
I've never played that game because, there's little pieces of the lore in Warframe that literally suggest that the main character of Dark Sector was the first Tenno.
Okay.
So there's like certain weapons that when you get them that he had in that game that they're just like, oh yes, these are remnants of the first Tenno, blah 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 blah. And like they kind of tell out his story, which I still don't really understand because I have no idea what happened in Dark Sector.
Right.
But from what I do understand, that he was kind of, even though he was the hero of the game, he was kind of roguish. So I believe that in terms, if one side is capitalist and one side is communist, by definition, we are probably anarchist mercenaries.
I was wondering, because I wanted to say anarchist, but then I started questioning that because let's define what an anarchist is then. An anarchist is one who does not follow or does not believe in following a specific type of government, correct?
Yes.
Now, the thing about the Tenno, though, is that they still follow a kind of society. They're still a part of a society, and they still follow the Lotus as, like, their mission giver and the person who tells them what to do a lot of the times.
True, but also you have to think of it this way, too, though, that even though you're an anarchist and you don't believe in a certain type of government, you have to believe in some type of moral codes or actions that help suit your anarchist beliefs. Because if you didn't, then that wouldn't really make any sense. Because then you would just not be choosing anything at all. Like, part of the reason why people choose to be anarchists is because they feel that essentially governments take advantage of people, or they, like, drive them apart, or they suppress freedoms that you could have if you just governed yourself. Like, typically... I will say typically. Do not hop on me on this. Typically, they believe that when you have groups of people, they will be able to govern themselves at some point because everybody has a moral compass.
Okay.
So that would be if the corpus are idealistic capitalism and the Grineer are idealistic communism,
right,
then we would be like the idealistic anarchists because we don't really have a side, but whatever fits in our moral code and our moral compass decides our fate. And that can be seen in like those missions that you were talking about of where we have to choose a side because then it's actually shaped by what you feel and what you've been experiencing when you're playing. Because for me, I will never help the Grineer based off that very first fucking mission.
Well, I mean, that's not hard to understand. That's not hard to understand. Okay. Well, okay. So you're suggesting then that they're anarchists, which makes more sense when you explain it that way. And I can very much accept that. Okay. So now, then my next question would be, if, again, we're going under the assumption that DE is doing this intentionally, what message do you think they're trying to send then? What do you think they're trying to say with the whole capitalist versus communist fight? What do you think they're trying to say by making the main characters anarchists? Just what message do you think they're trying to send? Because I feel like when you get to the point where you give such definitions... another
faction that we have to talk about, though. Because I am confused. I am interested to see what you call that last faction.
I believe the faction he's referring to is the Infested. The Infested. Now, I've been curious about that too, and I'm too scared to dive into that pool.
I actually forgot about them, but gosh darn it.
The Orkin?
Yes.
Okay.
But we can talk about the Orkin at some other point. I do want to know your thoughts on the Infested, though.
The Infested, I haven't come to a solid conclusion on that.
Would you say that's a dictatorship? Maybe? Question mark?
Possibly, because the thing about the Infested is they operate like a hive mind. And then the mission where you take down was essentially their leader, Lephantis. He mentions that when you become infested like them, you won't feel pain anymore because you'll all share a consciousness. So, I guess you could say it would be kind of like a dictatorship.
Like an idealistic
yeah.
If all of the factions
all of this
are
being idealistic, not... Yeah. I guess you could say that. I had kind of played with that idea a little bit, but I was too scared to go into the Infested because there is a lot to consider with the Infested alone, especially because the Infested don't have a race of their own. They are actually just... Their faction is made up of the other races that they've taken over with that hive mind. So I guess it could be like someone who indoctrinates someone into a dictatorship.
Oh, they're an idealistic cult, maybe. Then
I
guess technically they wouldn't be a side, but they're an idealistic cult.
That would make more sense to me. Yeah, that could work. Yeah, a hive mind-esque cult. Okay, well that actually makes a lot of sense. Okay. I can believe that. So with the Orkin, though, I thought about the Organ, and I don't know that this is certain. Again, this is just a theory, but I believe the Organ are supposed to represent the governments that have failed in the past. Reason being because the Tenno stem from the Organ. The Organ made the Tenno. And the Tenno actually hate the Organ for what they were and for what they made the Tenno to be, which are these killing machines and these suits that are like Iron Man suits with different powers. And people grew to hate them, but they had reached the peak of civilization. They had the most advanced technology. They were the strongest for a long time until like the sentients came out, and then they were kind of hurting a little bit, which is why they made the Warframes and the Tenno. And they were just the alphas. Now, I don't really know if it explicitly says in the game, or whether it was like the sentients or something like that, or if they just died off on their own. But at some point in time, the Organ died. Like, their whole society was left to nothing but their ships. In fact, we're not even sure what the Organ even looked like, because Lotus isn't even an Organ. She was a sentient. And the only thing that we have of anything of an ancient society would be the ancient infested, who are these tall, like, slimy beings. Who, and it's never specified what ancient society they belong to. They could be Organ, because they're often found on Organ ships too. So my conclusion, or my theory, is just that they might represent the civilizations in the past, like Rome, Greece, Macedonia, that have fallen in the past, and what are left are the people who are left to remember the mistakes made by those people, which could be the anarchists who realize that government doesn't work. So that's...
Even when you had the best one, it did not work out.
Exactly, because look at Rome. Rome was the mightiest civilization for a while, and it ended up burning down as well. So one could argue that government doesn't work, even though we've had proof of its perfection in the past. Even when they had a democracy in the past, like our own, it didn't work. So one could argue that, much like the main characters could argue the same thing against the Organ in the form of an anarchist. So that theory of them being anarchists actually makes a lot more sense when I think about it that way. Okay, let me see. Because I think that answers a lot of the questions. Okay, so if we have then the definitions of what the Tenno are, and we're able to then define what the other factions are, my question then goes back to what message DE is trying to send. Because again, if this is all intentional, if this is all supposed to be representing something, this can't be a message without a purpose. This can't be like it's like having a poem that has no actual deeper significance, because otherwise it's just writing on a paper. And I'd like to believe that DE would do more than just do writing on a paper. So what do you think then the message is being sent out by DE?
So just going out on a limb, and there's no real way of telling this. They could just be making a game, and we could just be
right.
But it's fun to think about things this way. So and I don't know what you guys think. I would think that maybe they're trying to say that spirituality is necessary in terms of government. Like, governing itself should not outweigh the morality that you need in order to live in a society. Because when I'm thinking about the Corpus, the Grineer, the Orcan, and the Infested, which I'm just going to call the Phantus, the things that they seem to lack are a sense of, they have morality, but they have morality only rooted in their specific causes. It's like it comes out to be something that diverts itself back to some grand scheme of thing that they're trying to achieve in the game. And ultimately, like, they don't have any substance for themselves. Each of the Tenno, however, are supposed to be more spiritually motivated. Like, we're doing things because of our own internal reasons. We have a moral code. We have like some idea of honor that we try to uphold, that doesn't have to do with necessarily a set institution above us, but like with ourselves, what we feel is right from wrong. So I think that maybe they're trying to say that like you need a little bit more than just rules to structure a society. You need some type of spiritual or something deeper beyond just following some type of status quo. Like, there's got to be more than that. You as a person with a mind, because I would say that that's probably a different thing. The Tenno are very well versed, but at the same time, because they're the anarchists, they have the least amount of resources available than any other faction, to the point where, like, we need the other factions to exist because we can't survive on our own. We actually at some of their times need their help, or we need to support one way or the other.
Right.
Like, we're not just unbiased hermits that exist in the universe and do what we want. Like, we actually are involved in the things that are going on. So even by the fact that we're not directly adhering to a specific structure, we are still a part of a grand structure.
Okay.
The only difference is we just don't buy into the whole, this is the one way that things are. We have thought-provoking ideas that actually shape and change who we are internally. So maybe they're trying to say...
It would make sense, because I'm recalling now a part of Tenno history lore when it talks about how the Tenno were first formed, that they speak of the Orokin, and apparently they had very advanced weaponry, which makes sense according to their advanced technology. But because they were losing the war with the Sentients, they realized that they had to take a step back and reanalyze their methods. And they had to go back to, quote-unquote, the weapons of old, which were gun and blade. So in a way, they were kind of going back to their roots, or their most purest form. So that could be like what you're saying, where they shouldn't have to adhere to a specific mold of a specific political party or governmental mindset, but rather more focus on their own personal goals and try to live out, I guess that's what you're saying, trying to live out by what they believe in what's right, rather than what a societal structure would believe is right.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Well, yeah, I think we actually uncovered a lot of the mystery. Again, none of this is actual fact. This is all just speculation. This is all just us coming up with a theory. However, I guess we could say that what's there is pretty damning. It's kind of hard to argue against what we've come up with. But hey, if you got any personal theories of your own, anything else that you'd like to contribute, let us know what you guys think. Thank you so much, Will, for coming on today, and for for giving your thought. I very much respect your opinion, so I figured you would.
Thank you. You know, I like to BS sometimes.
Yeah, so this is our like I said, our first episode. It'll always be me, of course, because I'm the most important element of this. But and occasionally I'll have other people on here along with some of our other friends, sometimes him and other people, to talk about other things. But hope you guys tune in for further episodes, and we will talk to you guys later.
Take care.